Hello and welcome to Deja View, the Ithacans Weekly Review podcast. I'm your host, Jake Leary, and I'm here today with my familiar spider, Timothy. I've tried that so many times that I messed it up. My other two guests, who are actual people, are Liza Gillespie and Sean Murphy, coming on the show for the first time, and I'm excited about it, which is why I'm not breaking up my sentences at all. We're here today to talk about the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, another Sabrina the Teenage Witch property, character that's been around since 1962, came out of Archie Comics. Since then has had animated shows, most notably a sitcom in the late 90s, which is one of the most delightful pieces of media to ever exist. And now we get The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, created by Roberto Aguirre Sacasa. I think I got it right that time, who wrote The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, a comic that came out a few years ago that imagines Sabrina as a more satanic character, which is what this show is. It's a Netflix exclusive, but it has the CW stink on it, and we'll talk about what that means in a little bit. Now, Sean, can you please try to summarize this nightmare mess of a show?
Yes. So Sabrina Spellman is a 15-year-old half-witch, half-mortal, and so she's raised by her Aunt Zelda and Aunt Hilda. She currently attends Baxter High, and she has all her friends, and she's dating her boyfriend, Harvey Kinkle. And in 5 days, I think 5 or 6 days' time, is her 16th birthday, which also lands on Halloween. And on her birthday, she's going to be attending her dark baptism, which is where she's going to become a full-fledged witch and abandon her life as a mortal, and she has to leave her school and all her friends and stuff. And throughout the first episode, she has a little bit of reservations about the whole thing, what she really wants, and she's starting to second guess herself in terms of that. And leading up to the dark baptism, the ceremony's begun. She just has to sign her name in the Book of the Beast, where she signs her soul away to the devil. And just before she signs, she backs out, and she tries to retain her status as a half-witch, half-mortal in a world that kind of either wants her to be all mortal or all witch, and she's sort of like in the middle, and she has to deal with the complications that arise because of that, essentially. Very like layman's terms plot, but...
Yes, because there are many things you're leaving out.
Yeah.
Not by any fault of your own. No offense,
I don't know if you're coming across that.
I was going to make a point.
Okay, got it.
You're leaving a lot of stuff out,
yeah,
because this is a 10-episode show that has 10 million things going on,
yes,
and no central plot.
Mm-hmm.
I think the biggest problem that I know all of us have is the way it's structured,
mm-hmm,
and the identity of what this thing is, because it's 50% Monster of the Week and 50% serialized show.
mm-hmm,
but neither one is explored fully. You have like a large chunk of episodes that are just referenced to other horror properties. I think 5 episodes are dedicated to The Exorcist, 2 to Pet Sematary, 1 to H.P. Lovecraft, and 1 to a 16th century author who wrote The Devil and Daniel Webster, which is like a trial murder story kind of thing. And then the other half of the show is about Sabrina. And they just wanted to retell these stories that they liked a lot.
Mm-hmm. It's annoying because like you said, the biggest problem with the show is like the structure of it. And what I think, like those bottle episodes where like they do the like references, the heavy like episode long references to like horror stories, because like the show very much is like a love letter to like the horror genre. I think they could have done if it was a longer season, but like you said, the show is constantly trying to be a 20 episode show when it's 10 episodes, and spends the first 4 of them trying to establish every single thing they're going to do in the last like 6, and it doesn't work.
And I'm going to pause you right there and say, this is a show that is a love letter to horror. This is everything I wanted in TV. Like my perfect TV show. It is High School and Monsters. That's all I want ever. And I hate this so much. So passionately, because it has so much potential. It lives in the same vein as Riverdale. It is based off of a show that I recently started watching and found out I loved, which is The Old Sabrina. And it incorporates these darker elements and is full of murder and goat men. And I love all of those things. But they deliver on nothing because they don't have like a central idea or drive. Whereas the other shows did, even if they were much simpler.
Right. It's annoying because, like you said, like I love this idea as a concept, and like I was so excited when they like announced the show was happening, even though I don't really like horror stories that much. I was just like, oh, like I love Sabrina, I love witches, I'm gonna love this. There's cats, even though he doesn't talk, but we'll get into that later. I guess
Let Salem speak.
Let Salem speak. But like,
get it trending, please.
But just because they don't have like a central focus, or because their hook is like so many things added on to each other, it just like I didn't find myself really enjoying it for the idea. I kind of like all the things that go wrong throughout it distracted me enough where like I wasn't enjoying myself in this thing that felt like was made for me, which was sad.
Yeah, and they trick you into thinking there is a central idea. There's a character who is antagonizing Sabrina from the background the entire time, who goes under the alias Miss Wordwell, but is actually named Madam Satan. And you find that out in the end of the show, and I think that's so goofy.
She named herself Madam Satan, but her real name is Lilith because she's like Satan's wife.
It's given to me by me.
But like, I don't really know the biblical specifics, but I know that Lilith is Satan's wife of some sort, and that's who she's supposed to be, because we don't really see Satan. He's not really that much of a presence in it. He's just kind of like in the background. But like, and in a statue in her school. But like, I would say, yes, she's the main antagonist.
And she's the main antagonist, but you don't really know what she's doing until the end. Like, the last scene of this show is her explaining her plan to a random character. Yeah. More or less.
Which, like, we should have known about, like, from the get-go, if anything.
Yeah. This isn't a subtle show.
Yeah.
Like, just tell me what's going on.
They tell you everything else that's happening constantly.
And they have a recap in case you don't already recognize that within the dialogue. It's very much, like, on the surface.
Expository.
Yeah.
To a ridiculous extent.
This is a show that has no respect for its viewers.
No.
Both because it's structured and makes no sense and it's way too long and the episodes are too long, and also because they'll tell you information, like characters will tell each other information that's only meant for the audience, and they'll do it multiple times. There are some really incredible examples of that when you hear them are mind-boggling.
It's like, it's to the point where you think that they have to be playing a trick on you with the amount that they do that. And I think Sabrina does it the most, just because she's like, because she's a very active character. Like, she is an active character. They did that very well. Again, like, on paper, the show is, like, very good, and it makes a lot of sense, and everything that's happening makes sense. But, like, when she's talking to people, like, she's telling them her exact motivation. She's telling them exactly what she's going to do and exactly why she's going to do it, opposed to just showing us that.
Yeah. She's, like, socially, she's good.
Yes.
And that's the case with a lot of this show. A lot of what this show is trying to do is very much like a lot of CW shows, where there are a lot of progressive aspects of it, in terms of inclusion, in terms of inclusion of a lot, like, race and sexuality. Even though the protagonists of all these shows are very, very white, a lot of the side characters are people of different sexualities or different gender identifying, I don't know how to put that, there's another word that's missing there, or different races. But none of them are characters. So you have these things that are really, like, these elements that are really good socially, but you don't have a good show, which is really disappointing, because you want those two things to go together, and there's no reason they shouldn't. And the show just doesn't land on that in a way that's very satisfying.
Yeah. I think, like, a lot of my gripes with in terms of, like, side characters and stuff like that, is all the plots very much feel like shoehorned in to the concern, like, oh, what about, like, what do all these side characters do when this show is literally called The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina? And then so they gave them this, like, mini arc of sorts to kind of orbit around up until the last episode very much. Susie's sort of plot in terms of her dealing with her father who doesn't really, he doesn't accept her, but he's very much, like, apprehensive about, like, how she, like, presents herself, because she's more, like, masculine identifying, if anything. And then they gave her, like, a plot about her great grandmother or something, and it was about how, like, she presented herself very masculine, like, and it really she wasn't really active in any given sense. I like Roz. I do like Roz. I like her I like her actress. I think she delivers, like, even very expository lines very well. But they kind of do the same thing with her in terms of they do try to set her up as more of an active not protagonist, but, like, side character, where she's she does have, I think it's myopic something atrophy. Do you know
the eye thing?
Yeah, she's like she's gonna go blind in, like, a couple months or years or something. And they kind of, like, hype it up as, like, this mysterious, like, power of sorts, which, like, I'm like, okay, sure, like, I can get on board with that. But then it gets to a point where I'm very, like, at a distance, I'm like, okay, I know you needed to do something with these people, so they weren't just, like, orbiting around what Sabrina was doing the entire time.
I think, like, the biggest issue that, like, the minor characters, and this isn't really in terms of, like, the social implications, the progressiveness of the show, but it's just, like, the whole like hook of the show is that like Sabrina wants a balance of like her mortal life and her witch life, and then and upon like and her witch life includes a lot of other little complications that like they don't really establish that well. But like the biggest thing with the side characters that like eventually all of her friends in her mortal life have magical powers or are involved in the magical world as much as she is, which like doesn't make it a separate world. They're both the same world, and so they lose the hook halfway through this season.
Sabrina has 3 friends, including her boyfriend, and it's Harvey, who she's dating, whose family are witch hunters, and so that defines them. There's Roz, whose family spurned a witch. I think it's not. They explicitly say it's not a Spellman, but whose ancestors spurned a witch and was cursed with blindness. And then Susie, whose ancestors helped the witches and so is treated well by them.
Yeah.
Those are the 3 characters represented, besides Madame Satan, who's there in the background. But those are the 3 friends she has. And then on the other side of it, you have her 3 witch antagonists, who are the stereotypical mean girls.
Yeah.
I know you're more into Prudence than I am, and I think she is the leader of the Mean Girls. She has something going for her. She is more interesting than most of the other characters in this show, but that is like saying the most bland human being is more interesting than the most interesting cardboard cutout, and like that's what a lot of these characters feel like.
Yeah, like I mean, my interest in Prudence is probably half just because I think the performance is really strong. Like I really like the actress who plays her, and I think she is like one of the definitely the most compelling character in that world to me, and that's why I think like the episode that kind of focuses on her, episode 7, where like they have the feast thing happening. I think that's the strongest episode, or at least my favorite, in terms of just like being paced really well and like having a central focus. That's not Sabrina. But yeah, she plays like, to reference the sitcom, she plays like the I almost called her Cordelia, that's a Buffy reference. She plays Libby, basically. She's like the mean girl of the school, but like her other school. She has 2 schools, so like she's the mean girl of that school.
She's the mean girl of that school, which means in the third episode, she tries to hang Sabrina, and her group are responsible for murdering small children.
Yeah, fourth,
thank you. Which is the other problem I have with this show. Everybody is a horrible person. There are no good people in this world, except for Hilda, who is repeatedly murdered by her sister. Harvey, who's an idiot. Her 2 friends, who we've described, have no personality.
Harvey just wants to draw his comic book. Let him do that.
And go to the mines.
No, he doesn't.
And he doesn't want to work in the mines.
Yes, this is a show set in Massachusetts, where the mines are the hot thing. They say it is.
What time is this show? Because Harvey has an iPhone X, but like Sabrina's still dealing with her like dial-up situation. I don't know what, like, do they pay their phone bill? Just like, I know Harvey's dad is like very abusive, but he's like, he gives him an iPhone X apparently. I know, and they're drawing all this stuff, and poor Tommy. But I'm just like very confused as to like when this show is taking place, because if you're gonna have it be in like the 80s or the 70s, like just own that for however long you need to. Don't like tease me into thinking that it's relatively modern, I guess.
I think that goes back into like the establishing of like the world, which just like is something that I have a problem with. Which, because like again, like I really like the like arc of the show. Like I think it ends and starts in a place that I can like get behind. Like I appreciate what they're trying to do, and I think it does end like with her like, okay, so it starts with her not signing her name in the dark baptism. Actually, it doesn't start with that. That's the second episode. The first episode doesn't really need to exist, but it does. So it kind of starts with that. Really, that's where the story starts, and it ends with her ending up signing her name in this book and kind of changing. Assumingly for the next season, she's going to start in a place where she's accepted like her witch life, and like all of that makes sense to me. But like all of the little complications of how we got there don't.
No, a lot of times you'll have a bottle episode that will retroactively be contextualized as important.
Yeah.
So everything that Sabrina does is later explained by Madame Satan to be part of the plan, because she needs to complete these tasks to fulfill the prophecy so she can become a powerful thing, because she exists in 2 worlds. So that's all this show is. It's like the standard YA story that I never want to see realized again. And they don't stray from that at all, but they also act very high and mighty like that isn't happening.
Yeah.
And that's all the show is.
I think they were because it was mentioned before, this very much feels like they pressed like a lot. They tried to make 20, but they can only have 10 for right now. And like this first season feels very much, I think you mentioned this, how Sabrina's main personality traits that she cares about other people, and that she's empathetic, and that she like wants to challenge the status quo. But and then towards the end, that's when she's sort of accepted her witch life, and she's sort of just kind of embracing the status quo. But like on the reverse side of that, like her witch life of sorts, which I can get behind if I want like a evil Sabrina, not evil necessarily, but not as willing to help other people as she was in the first season, which like I can get behind that just a little bit, and I'm probably going to end up watching it because I thought this was great Halloween programming. I was very much inclined to like sit with candles lit and like not summon Satan, but you know,
it could happen.
Yeah. So I think I'm game for a second season to see where it progresses from there. Like my minor gripes with terms of like characterization, I can set aside for just a little bit longer, maybe.
I'm here for more of this, but this is another show and another property that I'm going to go into kind of hate watching it, because it's so much of what's happened is irredeemable to me. I find a lot of these characters irredeemable. You're supposed to think that people change, and they do, but they don't gradually change. They suddenly change. Zelda does this all the time. One of the ants is a horrible monster. Terrible person, mean to Sabrina, murders her sister repeatedly, and resurrects her in the pet cemetery they have in their backyard, because why can't we have an original idea? Let's just do what's already been done a couple of times. And yet, several times throughout the season, they'll have her be nice and have her be friendly, and not in a way that's gradual. Because then, 5 seconds later, she'll go back to the Church of Night and will start hitting on the head of the Church of Night, and then is whipping herself because, you know, she loves Satan. And then even when they have happy moments, they ruin them.
Yeah, there really aren't, like, it's confusing because, again, like we've talked about so much, Sabrina is a very, like, active, progressive character that she's trying to change things in both the mortal world and, like, the witch world for the better. She's trying to, like, stop oppressive, like, rituals and oppression just in general in, like, her human world. But, like, the show, like, I don't know if it's picking a side of, like, where it stands on terms of just, like, sometimes episodes end on a really downer note, and sometimes they end on, like, a happy-ish note. Like, with The Feast in particular, and just in terms of, like, are these people good or bad, I feel like they're not picking that for any of their characters. It most of the times, they're just bad. They'll have some nice moments, but it gets, like, retroactively, like, completely, like, changed.
Yeah. Like Hilda.
Yeah.
Who is abused constantly throughout the season. Is miserable throughout the entire season, is miserable throughout her entire life because her sister is destroying her repeatedly. And she has a very poorly established romantic relationship with
the guy who looks like Taika Waititi.
Who we all had to look up because we could swear
it really
him.
does look like him.
We were watching him, we're like, I guess that's him, maybe. I'm not too sure.
It wasn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't,
shockingly
disappointingly
enough.
enough.
Not clickbait.
And equally disappointingly, they have a kiss at, like, the end of the show when the big climax is done and all the evil witches are gone. And as he's walking away and Hilda's really happy, like, his eyes flash because he's also a demon because nothing good can happen.
We don't know what he is. He could be a werewolf.
Maybe his contacts were just kind of maybe like a car drove by.
I hope that's
and, like,
what it
slamming
is.
on the brakes.
Yeah.
If that's what they explain this show as, I will be much happier.
I want money down on that.
I'll pick you up on that.
But again,
she went to like once Zelda revealed that she took Father Blackwood's daughter, and Hilda comes in and she's like, I'm moving out, and I was like, you just kissed him, like, you didn't like sign a lease on anything. I don't know what you're not moving out with him, she's moving out of the room. I understand, like, I guess a newfound independence of sort, but I was like, you're not moving in with this man just yet, I don't think.
It's fake character development.
Yeah.
As with every other character in this show. Which, again, in case it isn't clear, I hate with a passion. But that isn't to say that I don't dislike this kind of show, because this is the evil side of Riverdale, which we're going to go into and talk about right now, which does a lot of these same things, but just does it much, much better. And that's something I can get behind, and I'm going to gush about for a little bit. Okay, so this show doesn't stand up on its own, as we've talked about at length, and as I've ranted about at length. But it also doesn't stand up in comparison to its sister show, which is Riverdale, because this very much is ambiguously in that universe.
It was meant as a companion piece, I think, originally, because it was going to be on the CW, and then, for whatever reason, development-wise, it ended up on Netflix.
And it has the same show creator.
Right.
And I think it has the same producer, Greg Berlanti, who has produced a lot of the CW things. So that's why it has a lot of the same problems. But Riverdale acts as the positive flip of this, I guess I'd say, because it has a lot of the same tropes throughout it, and has a similar tone and feels very similar, but where Sabrina is a trash fire, this is just a trash. It almost worked. And I think this is something that, for the most part, we all feel strongly about.
I feel like Riverdale, yes, Riverdale has some glaring trope problems, but I think the difference between Riverdale and the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina lies in the fact that Riverdale is self-aware. And there are parts of like Chilling Adventures of Sabrina which like there can be an argument that it knows what's happening or it knows kind of what it's doing, maybe less so with the like poor dialogue and expositional dialogue, but like with some of the tropes, I feel like they are trying to comment on them, where Riverdale takes these tropes and like runs with them, and that's why it's just like a fun garbage, whatever you want to call it. But like with Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, if it were on the CW, I feel like I would like it so much more.
Yeah, the one thing I will say about the CW is their characters are fun.
Yeah.
Even if characters aren't good, they're fun to watch.
Yeah.
I would watch a show about Cheryl Blossom all day long because she's delightful. You know, they have protagonist syndrome, and Archie Andrews is a horrible character. Yeah. Not as bad as Sabrina, but also not good because he doesn't have a personality. I feel very strongly about this. I've been thinking about comparing these two shows for so long. I've finished watching it 2.5 hours ago. I guess I can't say that, but for long enough to feel high and mighty about it. Mm-hmm. And also because Sabrina is Riverdale with monsters, and as the person who introduced me to Riverdale, you know that is all I've wanted the entire time I've watched that show. Mm-hmm.
I think like the thing about the CW, which like I think the reason why I think the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina would like fare better if it was on the CW is one, we talked about the structure and the pace issues. If this like show had 20 episodes, you could do so many more monster references, and you could do so many more like standalone, just like monster Buffy like style type things, and it wouldn't bother me at all. I would find it very fun, and I do kind of find it fun in this show, but like again, I'm just like, oh right, this is like a serialized like 10 episode thing. We don't have time for this. But if it was in that would be amazing. And also, if it's on the CW, even though I think the writing styles are like very similar, even though Riverdale's a little more aware of what it's doing, I feel like if this show was on the CW, it wouldn't bother me nearly as much.
No, because a show on the CW means something. And what that isn't good. Like if you're turning on the CW and you're watching Arrow, you know exactly what you're in for. And it
or
is
Supernatural, or yeah.
Exactly.
Oh goodness.
It's not quality programming. Not even close.
But it's consistent.
It's consistent, and it's very likable.
Tell me that sophomore year in high school.
Oh yeah, same. Tell me that now. Listen, I watch Riverdale. I'm caught up. And again, like back to like the connection that this might or may not have with Riverdale, because like they are in the same like world. Because you have like a character that like in episode 2 of this past season of Riverdale, season 3 that they're on right now, a kid dies in Riverdale, and he just showed up in episode 9, I think, in Sabrina, and he's not dead. He's a pizza delivery boy, but he jumped out of a window in Riverdale like I don't know how the timelines match up, but like they didn't comment on it. So like it exists in the same world.
Went over my head. I'm not caught up in any regards.
It's just like I at that point I was just like, okay, this is happening.
Yeah. The show only exists to reference other pieces of media, so it makes sense.
Fair.
Yeah. And Riverdale, there is an episode where they go to Greendale, where Sabrina is set. There are references to Riverdale in Sabrina consistently throughout it. So those worlds are connected, and maybe if there's a crossover, that'll salvage something of Sabrina, like that'll bring it into a world that's slightly better and at the very least knows what it is.
I would be into having Sabrina go into Riverdale.
And she'd fit.
I feel like she'd be very fun there.
Yeah, I'd love to see Sabrina try to figure out what is going on in that town where everybody is trying to murder everybody, and now there are satanic cults sacrificing people. Like, it would fit.
Yeah.
It would make sense.
Yeah.
On the other side of comparing this show to better products is the original Sabrina sitcom, which I would be I know, Sean. I would be very upset if we didn't talk about, even for a few minutes, just because I started watching that in anticipation of this, and love it to death.
Let Salem speak.
Let Salem speak.
Salem the cat, who's in this new version of Sabrina, is my favorite character, like one of my favorite characters on TV.
Yeah.
I say that confidently, and I mean the original version where he's talking and like eating pancakes and is a creepy little puppet, and I love him so much.
Yeah, he's the best part of that original show. I think like I have to acknowledge that I'm coming from like place where I sat and watched this every morning at 6 a.m. for like a good most of my childhood. It came on before school. I would watch it. Oh yeah. And like, of course, like I'm gonna kind of hold this to like a really high standard. And I know the shows are very, very different, but like just the way they use the characters in a sitcom makes me appreciate, and the magic, just like that as well. But like I love it so much more in sitcom form.
Yeah, well, because the core idea of this character is, I have magic. What can I do with it? How can I make the lives of my friends better? And in Sabrina the Teenage Witch, it's always, I'm going to do this thing I shouldn't do. And it's made things worse, but A, I feel like I've learned from it and progressed from it. And B, it's quirky fun. It's not, oh no, I raised my boyfriend's brother from the dead. Oops. It's, oh no,
Sorry.
I needed a date for the dance, so my aunts made me a man out of Mando. And that is a real thing that happens in that show, and it's fantastic.
Exactly.
Because the stakes are so low because it's a sitcom.
Right. And I think, and the stakes would be, I think if this was on CW, circling back, the stakes would be a little bit lower, which I think would give more leeway for them to do all the things that they're trying to do at the same time as have like this very like intense satanic sideshow.
And this is a problem that you often run into. Not you specifically, because I don't think you've had a lot of encounters with
I don't watch a
Satanism.
lot of Satan-based media, but maybe we'll get there.
I've got this. Or we will. If I have anything to say about it, we will. That's going to be the arc of this relationship, is just me slowly introducing you to more satanic media. No, yeah, I think one of the biggest problems I have with this is the stakes in the first season of this show about teenagers is, we got to stop Satan. Like, Satan's coming for me. I don't want him to have my soul. Those are high stakes.
Yeah.
Those are very high stakes. Whereas Riverdale, the first season is, we have to solve the murder of one man. And the second season is, we have to find the murderer of a bunch of people.
Yeah. And it was his dad.
Yes. We don't need to go into that.
And the murder is being solved by teenagers.
Yeah. Who love Nancy Drew very much. And that's why they're qualified.
Club.
God, this is the Nancy Drew Power Hour here. Yeah, again, many problems with Sabrina that aren't present in Riverdale, as bad a show as Riverdale is.
And there's like, circling back to like Sabrina the Teenage Witch, like the sitcom, I also just like think that, as we talked about in the like original segment, like every character in the show that's not Sabrina, like could be bad. And like her aunts are like kind of, well, at least Aunt Zelda, for instance, was like evil in like the first couple of episodes. And I think that just like, again, it affects her characterization in a way that makes me upset, but also like I hold her aunts from the sitcom just to be like the best incarnation of like those characters. And part of me just wishes that they would be a little bit more lighthearted, which I think would fix a lot of her own characterization as well.
Yeah, making a world more like Riverdale, more like the Teenage Witch, where those characters are likable and that world is enjoyable, even if it's not fun all the time because it's about murder, would go a long way.
I think it's difficult just because, like, Sabrina the Teenage Witch is like not what the Chilling obviously not what Chilling Adventures is,
And
it's adapting it from something that's already existing. And I think just kind of like placing those characters in like a darker setting just kind of would be a little bit too much. Maybe like elements here and there would help, but I just like,
it would go a long way.
Yeah, I definitely, because Melissa Joan Hart's Sabrina wouldn't fit with Kiernan Shipka's like Sabrina, which I've come to love Kiernan Shipka's Sabrina. I wish that there were better moments for her, but I am sold. I'm sold with Kiernan Shipka's Sabrina.
Yes.
I'm just gonna have that.
Character-wise, yes, there's a lot going on there. And we're gonna have to cut this off here. All right, it's been a spooky time, guys. Thank you very much for coming on. You guys get a chance to plug yourself very, very quickly.
Oh, man.
As fast as you can. Go, Sean.
Go, Sean.
At Sean M. Murph on Twitter and Instagram. Oh my gosh.
Good.
You can
look of fear in your
follow
eyes.
me on Twitter at Liza_Gillespie.
You can follow me on Twitter at JD_Leary. I think that's my Twitter. I don't know. You can read my review of this in the Ithacan coming up this week. Thank you for watching. It's been Deja View. We're on iTunes and Spotify. Watch us on YouTube. You can see my spider Timothy. It's been a good time. The red light is making me very afraid.